The next presentation will be held by Guido van der Zwet, who's the General Manager of Commerce of IPS Powerful People. The topic will be the influence of the oil devaluation on the Mexican economy. Guido, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, thank you, Karel. I think it's a very clear picture. For me also, I will try to set a picture on what the oil devaluation is. I made a nice presentation in the weekend and I could do it all over again yesterday. So yeah, let's see where we get. And hopefully this will be the start of the discussion that we will have the coming months. I agree with you also that, yeah, hopefully it's the worst case scenario that we're presenting at the moment, and hopefully we are a lot more positive in a couple of weeks. Okay, for those who are also in the introduction session to the trade mission, there's a little bit of things repeated. I will show you a couple of slides that I also showed a couple of weeks ago, but after that we'll go to the current situation. So who am I? I'm Guido van der Zwet. I'm the General Manager of Commerce for IPS Powerful People. I've been responsible for Mexico for 7 years, and the last year I'm also responsible for global business development, which means I've been on the phone the last weeks also with other countries. For example, our office in Saudi Arabia, where they just started a complete lockdown. People are not, there's a curfew there at 3 o'clock, you cannot go outside, which obviously affects the business. But let's focus today on Mexico. We are basically a company that does recruitment, permanent staffing, which is obviously also difficult to hire someone in your company if you're not allowed to go out and go to an interview or go to an office. We do payroll solutions. There are some things happening there also, which maybe we can discuss another time. And we do crewing, where we have vessels, where we have crew on board. You can imagine that, for example, we have a vessel in Curaçao where it's not allowed to fly to anymore. Yeah, how can you do crew changes there? We're looking at solutions there. If we can do anything there, we're more than willing to help. But today we will talk about Mexico and what the oil price has for influence on the economy. I'm also the co-founder at the time of the Dutch Energy Association, which is now part of Holland House, which we're all listening to now. I don't think I need to further introduce, since we're all here, we all found our way, right? Let's get started. Today I would like to tell you a little bit about the oil devaluation, as I said. So I'll give you a state of the industry up to the 4th of March. That's when things started to change, the current situation and where we are today. And I'll give you my personal conclusion of what I think are the next steps, which will probably change again in the next weeks, but then at least we know where we are. So also I see there's quite a few people from the Netherlands. So I'll give you a general idea of what the oil industry in Mexico looks like. It has changed a lot over the last years. So I'll give you a very quick review. I'm sure you will not be able to follow everything, but the presentations will be shared. And also I'll leave you my contact details if you have any specific questions. So let's start. The political update. As you know, we have Andrés Manuel López Obrador in the office since December 2018. He made quite a few changes in the energy realm. His first objective is to get out corruption out of the country. He has a strong taste for nationalism, wants to reinforce Pemex. He's a big fan of direct assignations instead of tendering. And the energy reform has been renamed to the new energy model. And current contracts are respected, but new bidding rounds are paused for the moment. Now, I will explain you the energy reform and what that is in a little bit as well in a couple of slides. So Pemex actually changed even their slogan. They're now called Pemex por el rescate de la soberanía, which means to rescue the national sovereignty, which actually means that they would like to be self-sufficient in the end. We will see that if we look at the numbers of oil that's being exported and the gasoline that's coming in, that has a negative trade balance at the moment, which is only becoming worse, which I will get back in the next slides. The government investments in Pemex, they're quite big amounts. For this year, there's 4 billion euros planned to be invested in Pemex. The fields that you see in the screen now, and I repeat, maybe you cannot see them very well, but you can definitely see them once we send the presentation. are the fields that will have the focus this year. As I mentioned, this is an update up to the 4th of March. What happens after this, we will see. Obviously, one of the plans is also to make a new refinery. Here you see which fields there are, and on the right side you see where they are based. Dos Bocas refinery is also obviously one of the big projects of the new government, which I will talk to on the next slide, about. The refinery in Dos Bocas was announced in December 2018. It was already in the campaign, and as soon as he won, he started. This is what it will look like, more or less. It kicked off already in June 2019, the construction. The completion is still planned for 2022, and it will have a capacity for 340 million barrels per day, of which 170 million barrels will be for gasoline, 120 million for diesel, and 50 million for jet fuel, asphalt, and other means. The awarded companies here are Van Oort, who is doing the groundwork together with Grupo Huerta Madre. They're about to finish in these months, and then the next packages will come in. It's a modular refinery, which means that it has 5 different packages of construction before it's finished, and the packages were all won through tendering by different companies. So Fluor Enterprises and Icafluor will do package 1. Samsung Engineering, Asociados Construcciones DBNR, will do packages 2 and 3, and then KBR and Grupo Hostotti Paquillo will do the packages 4 and 5. The total investment is estimated at $8 billion USD. And here you see a little bit why. The average oil trade balance is declining. It's going negative, and this is still declining steeply. If you look at the vehicle count that's being estimated for Mexico, we're around 40 million at the moment, and we are estimated to go to 90 million. Obviously, a big part of that will also be different fuels, electrical cars, but that movement is still in the kid shoes, as we say in Holland. It still has to start and come up. So a big part will still be gasoline. Now the other refineries, Salamanca, Francisco Madera, Miguel Hidalgo de Tula, and Antonio Dovalli, you can see where they are here, will also get upgrades and expansions in order to decrease the reliance on US imported fuel. On the graph below, you can see what the gasoline production has been, which are the blue graphs, and the imported is the dotted lines. So there's quite a big gap here. On diesel, it's the same in the orange. Diesel, the situation is not so bad, but it's becoming worse as well. Now, as I said, it's not called the energy reform anymore. It's called the new energy model. This basically meant that the oil and gas market was opened to international companies coming into coming into Mexico and actually bid on geographical blocks, which you can see here on the picture on the left. These were done by bidding rounds, where you can bid on on a certain geographical area. These areas, you can compare them, for example, with what they've also done in the US. Only these blocks are more or less 80 times bigger than what they are doing in the US. It started in August 2014, and 111 contracts have been given out, of which 107 exploration and production contracts, 3 farm-outs, and 1 under the new administration. There was a 5-year plan for doing these bids on the different blocks, but this was cancelled last year, so we only got to about 25% of the original 5-year plan. The envisaged investments have been 3.4 billion for deep water projects, 26 billion for shallow water, and 6 billion for onshore projects. And the companies that I will allude to a bit more on the next page are 24 based on shallow waters, 15 deep water, and 28 on land. These are the companies. Again, this is even smaller, but here you can see for each of the blocks that you saw on the other page with the colors, which company has won which field. It are companies from 20 countries worldwide, and it's led more or less to the 170 awarded contracts that I mentioned before. And the estimated investment in total should be $160 billion in Mexico. All foreign investment, except for the national companies, which is a bit. So the income for the state, and as I said, this is my last slide on the energy reform. From 2015 to 2019, already 6.9 trillion Mexican pesos were made. 3.7 trillion are expected this year. In the next period, which is within still the presidential term, we expect another 18 trillion Mexican pesos. On the right side, you can see a graph with what the percentages are that go to the government from each of the blocks. So 1.1 is around 1.1. How much is made there? So between 74% and 83%. And you can see all the other ones. Here are the two farm outs that were at the time that this sheet was made by Amexi during their event in 2018. And also, what you see, these are the wells that are approved by CNH. There are still more to be approved, but 11 wells have been approved for this year, which are 2 on land, 6 in shallow waters, 2 in deep water, and 1 in ultra deep water. Now, I remember very well, I did this presentation a couple of weeks ago. I think it was the beginning of February in Holland, and everything was looking quite all right. There was only a small virus in China, but yeah, a couple of things changed. So now I go to the current situation and where this will go. First, obviously, there was the virus, the COVID-19, which obviously does not help. We see the global economy going down. In Karel's presentation, he mentioned a decline of GDP of 2 to 4%, while growth of 2.5% were estimated. In Mexico, we were already starting a recession and no growth is expected. So we have to see where we go. Obviously, the price war that he also mentioned between Saudi Arabia and Russia and the US, who's mingling in as well, made a decline in the oil price. This is the Mexican basket. I will come back on the Brent oil, which is basically the international standard for oil. And then obviously this week, we also had a vote against a US brewery. I'm not sure if you mentioned that, but that also made the investment climate a lot more difficult. I will not go too much into detail about this because that's more for a different discussion. I will go more into the one in the middle about the oil prices. But these three are actually things that have been happening over the last week, and we will only see the consequences in the coming weeks and months, and hopefully it stays there. So if we look at the devaluation of the peso, when I last did the presentation, the peso was, this is against euros, so don't be shocked that this is dollars because that is not at this level yet. But yesterday, the euro was worth 26.77 pesos. Now, Karel also mentioned what kind of influence this can have on economies, especially if you're importing. That's very difficult times if you're paying it in Mexican pesos. It's the worst performer out of 130 currencies, followed by Bloomberg over the last months. The reasons that I just mentioned, the corona, the plunge in the oil price, and the investment climate with the decline and the closing of the beer manufacturer that was going to open in Jalisco, but that was voted against and now turned down, although it was already 2/3 ready for operations. Now, all of this together brings us to the following situation. We have, let's see what I'm doing here. The oil price. So Brent crude, which is basically the crude that is the standard for the world, was at 55.77 the 24th of February. That's just 1 month ago. Yesterday it closed at 29.74. That's a decline of 47%. The Mexican basket was at 46.41 the 24th of February and is now at 15.33. That's a decline of almost 70%. We are lucky that the Mexican government closed the hedge fund for their production of 2020. at $49 per barrel. This means there's sort of an insurance on your selling price of crude, but the amount of barrels was not disclosed, although I doubt that it will increase soon. And obviously, if the situation goes on longer, we don't know what's happening after 2020. The IOCs are already taking actions. For example, Shell already announced that they will do 20% less investment, and they have already postponed their buyback of their shares. Same for Total, 5 billion investment less, and Equinor as well. They will also postpone their share buyback. And Chevron also announced yesterday that they will invest 4 billion less. Murphy, one of the operators in Mexico, also already is taking action. The problem here is these are global numbers, but we have to see what effect this will have on Mexico. Now, if we look here, we see the world production of oil over the last years. Usually the consumption and the production are quite near each other. Although you see oil prices change if the consumption is lower than the production, of course. We already saw a decline in the beginning of this year, which also led to the idea of OPEC to lower the production, which was declined, and now we are in the price war, which made it even worse. The fact that most people are now at home office, are not allowed to travel, planes are on the ground, people are not driving, export, import, and also transport is going down. It's taken a big jump. So there's an oversupply of at least 20%. So some of the analysts, I'm not a macroeconomist, are saying it might go down even to 25%. This means that there will be more pressure on the oil price and the production does have to come down. The problem is these are all developments that have been happening over the last days. So the big question is, where are we going? And that's also something that doesn't help the consumer confidence. Nobody knows. Uncertainty is probably the biggest enemy of the economy. So we have to see where we're going. That's also why on this side, this is all we can say about it today. We have to see in a couple of weeks how the virus is developing and how the economy will react to it. Now, if we look at the Mexican economy and the state budget, the total budget is a bit over 6 trillion Mexico pesos, of which a big part of the income, more than 50%, obviously comes from the taxes. In this part, you will also see the income that comes out of the oil and gas rounds. So the IOCs that are now operating in Mexico and the percentages that I showed you earlier, that's going to the petroleum fund, which comes into the taxes part of the budget. Pemex itself, with its production, is on this side, which is the income for sales of goods, services, and any other income. On the other side, the investments, for example, in the refinery, are on this side. As Karel also mentioned, we have not seen that big of an influence yet on the economy, but there are two things that will change this. And again, I don't know where this is going, but we have to see in the next weeks. A couple of things that will happen is obviously the employment rate. As Karel also mentioned, and I think he was still a little bit careful, with 2 million Americans being without a job. If the US has a cold, then sometimes, or always, Mexico gets a pneumonia, and the US has a pneumonia now. So where are we going with this? So the total population in Mexico is around 126 million, of which the workforce is 60 million. There's an unemployment rate, which in my opinion is very difficult to calculate with such a big informal workforce, of 3.66%. The informal workforce is half the population. Now, remember, these are the people on the street that are selling food, and they don't have any other income. As Karel also mentioned, these people don't have an income if people don't buy their products. So that's going to be one of the things we're going to have a look at. The informal workforce income is 22.5% of the GDP, and the formal workforce income is about 77.5%. Now, out of this formal workforce, there are also other tricks where people don't pay the 100% social security and that sort of tricks. But I will not go into that at the moment. We can do that in another moment. But if things will change there, we will see rapid movements on the income of the government as well. Here you see the income from the social security, which is 374 billion Mexican pesos. That will obviously have a big impact as well on the income. And then we have to start cutting on the right side on where we are spending the money. And another thing we haven't mentioned yet, and which is obviously also not in the budget, is the investment in the public health. Because we are now in a very serious health situation. There's a very limited number of intensive care beds. There's a very limited amount of resources, especially for those people in the informal workforce, where they have to go if they become sick. So the entidades sujetas a control presupuestario, the entities under budget, of which the IMSS, the Social Security, is one, they will need a very big investment in the coming weeks or even months. So these are the things that I think in the upcoming webinars we can have a chat and follow this very clearly. You can find all of this information on the diputados.gov.mx website. I also have a slide with all the sources that I'm using. So basically, we don't really know where we are going. But in my personal opinion, and I'm also someone who has lived here for 14 years, I've seen that the Mexican people always help each other, always find it out. We could see that the last time with the earthquake only 2 years ago. People find a way. People are very creative in finding solutions. However, this is a big scale of a problem. Now, in the end, we will overcome the COVID-19 crisis. We will find either a cure or people will have their immunity by having the disease. If this happens within 1 to 3 months, the damage could be repaired in such a way that the economy will boost. People are allowed to go outside again. They will travel, they will go out for food, they will spend some money, although some people will be a bit cautious, and the sooner the better. So the less time it takes, the closer we get to the 3 months, obviously the effects will be bigger. If this becomes 3+ months, the situation will become more difficult. However, within those 3 months, we've already had a couple of other webinars discussing this. The other side, the oil prices will stabilize and eventually increase. In the end, the world population is still growing. In the end, the energy needs will still be growing. However, on the short base, the predictions on Brent oil, a couple of the big financial institutions such as Barclays, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, are averaging at about a $30 price for the barrel of the Brent barrel that I showed you earlier. The IOCs, with the measures that they are taking, are preparing for a cost price of $20. Our president mentioned this Tuesday in his morning session that production average in Mexico is $12, and he also has areas where it's $4 of cost price. Now, I don't know what we should believe of everything he says, but that's up to you for yourself to decide. So once this starts happening, Mexico needs to increase the production. We need foreign investment to do this. I think the reinstalling the bidding rounds where the government does not have to invest, but will get a lot of money from this, is one of the most healthy ways to do this. Obviously, there's a couple of steps that have to be taken before the bidding rounds are back. Pemex has to be restructured. It's currently the company with the biggest oil debt in the world. It has over $100 billion in debt, and it is already reporting record losses still. We have to see what happens there in the coming years. It's already under restructuring, and it's one of the priorities of the current government, what we have to see. Then the 111 contracts that I showed you earlier need to deliver. The presentation of Amexi of last year mentioned that they will be at a production of 280,000 barrels by 2024. Now, if these numbers add up, then there's no reason why not to come back to the bidding rounds. So if we would reinstall the bidding round, it would lead to an increase of national income without investment. And as I mentioned, between 66 and 93% of the income goes to the government anyway. And it will lead to a job creation of over 300,000 jobs. If also the remaining 75 the rounds would be held successfully. That's where I hope we are in a couple of months. But then again, this is speculation and my personal opinion. Well, that's the way in the oil where we should go in Mexico. And for the time being, I would recommend you to stay healthy and safe, but also be creative. For example, Shell at his gasoline station is now giving antibacterial gel if you get your gasoline there. These kind of things are, the way the economy moves. And I think that in the end, we will get there. And I wish you all the best in the coming months. And I'm sure we will see each other again soon in these kind of sessions in the webinars. So that's all from my side. On the last slide, I only have here's my contact details if you have any questions. And here also on the last slide, you'll find the sources. As also Karel mentioned with his slide, these are old news from the last days. And this list is adding and adding. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please let me know.